I have spent my entire career caring for animals, dogs, cats, livestock, wildlife. I understand animals in a way that most people do not. I know their behavior, their instincts, the way they think and communicate. After 15 years as a veterinarian, there is not much that surprises me anymore. But I have never understood what lives in the woods outside Cutter's Hollow. I am not sure anyone can. My name is Derek Mullins. I am 33 years old, and I run a small animal clinic in a rural community in the Ozark Mountains of northern Arkansas. Or I did, until 2 years ago. Now I live in a city 3 states away, trying to forget what I saw, trying to convince myself that it was not real. It was real, all of it, and I need someone else to know the truth. Cutter's Hollow was a small town, isolated, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone and strangers are noticed immediately. The nearest city was over 2 hours away. The town was surrounded by dense forest, rolling hills, and hollows that seemed to swallow sound. Hunting and fishing were a way of life there. People knew the woods. They respected them. But something was different last autumn. Livestock started going missing. Pets disappeared from yards. Strange sounds echoed through the night. Howling that did not quite sound like wolves or coyotes. People talked about it at the diner, at church, at the feed store. Something was out there, something new. Then the attack started. What I am about to describe happened over the course of 3 weeks. By the time it was over, 7 people were dead, and the town I had lived in my whole life would never be the same. I know what killed those people. I have seen them up close, and the worst part is not what they are now. The worst part is what they used to be. It started on a Thursday night, around 9 in the evening. I was closing up the clinic when my phone rang. It was Bill Dawkins, a farmer who lived on the outskirts of town. His voice was shaking. He said something had gotten into his sheep pen. Something had killed 3 of his animals and badly injured a 4th. I drove out to the Dawkins farm with my emergency kit. What I found in the sheep pen made my stomach turn. The dead animals had not just been killed. They had been torn apart, savaged in a way that suggested something far more violent than a typical predator attack. I had seen coyote kills before, even a rare mountain lion attack. This was different. This was brutal, purposeful. The surviving sheep was in shock, bleeding from deep gashes across its flank and hindquarters. I did what I could to stabilize it, while Bill stood nearby, shotgun in hand, scanning the tree line with wild eyes. He said he had heard the commotion around 8:30. By the time he got outside, the attackers were gone. He had caught a glimpse of them disappearing into the woods. Dogs, he thought. A whole pack of them. But they did not move like dogs. They moved wrong, too coordinated, too purposeful. I asked if he had called animal control. Bill laughed bitterly and said animal control was one guy who worked part-time and was currently on vacation in Florida. Besides, he said, these were not normal dogs. He had been hunting these woods for 40 years. He knew every animal that lived out there. These were something else. I finished treating the sheep, but I could not stop thinking about what Bill had said. Dogs that moved wrong. Dogs that were something else. I would understand what that meant soon enough. The emergency town meeting was held 3 days later, after 2 more farms had been attacked. The community center was packed, standing room only, everyone talking over each other with a mixture of fear and anger. The attacks had escalated, more livestock killed, a hunting dog dragged out of its owner's yard in the middle of the night, and then, most disturbing of all, a hiker had been found on one of the trails outside town. He was still alive, but barely. His legs had been mauled so badly that he would never walk again. The hiker, a man from out of state who had been camping in the national forest, told the hospital staff that he had been attacked by dogs, but not normal dogs. These were huge, he said, hairless or nearly so, and their eyes. He kept talking about their eyes, said they looked almost human. At the meeting, people demanded answers. Some blamed a pack of feral dogs, escaped pets that had gone wild. Others blamed wolves, though wolves had not been seen in this part of Arkansas in over a century. A few of the older residents muttered about things they had heard from their grandparents, old stories about creatures in the woods, but no one took them seriously. The sheriff, a man named Roy Hendricks, tried to calm everyone down. He said they were organizing hunting parties. They were bringing in experts from the state wildlife agency. They would find whatever was responsible and put it down. I sat in the back of the room, listening, thinking about what I had seen at Bill Dawkins' farm. The wounds on those sheep had not been made by any animal I knew. The bite radius was wrong. The pattern of the attack was wrong. Everything about it was wrong. After the meeting, I approached Sheriff Hendricks and offered to help. As a veterinarian, I had experience with animal behavior, with tracking, with understanding how predators thought. The sheriff accepted gratefully. We would start the search the next morning. The search party assembled at dawn. About 15 men, mostly hunters and farmers who knew the land. They were armed with rifles and shotguns, accompanied by tracking dogs that seemed unusually nervous, whining and pulling at their leads. We split into groups of 3 and headed into the forest. I was paired with Sheriff Hendricks and a local hunter named Virgil Cross, a grizzled man in his 60s who had been hunting these woods since he was a boy. Virgil was the kind of man who did not speak much, but when he did, people listened. For the first few hours, we found nothing. The dogs picked up scents but could not seem to follow them. The trails would start strong and then simply vanish, as if whatever we were tracking had ceased to exist. Around noon, we found the den. It was in a hollow about 3 miles from town, a natural depression in the hillside that had been widened into a shallow cave. The smell hit us before we saw it. A thick animal musk mixed with something else, something that made my stomach turn. The smell of rotting meat, the smell of death. The entrance to the den was littered with bones, animal bones mostly. Deer, rabbits, what looked like a large dog. But there were other bones too, larger ones, bones that I recognized from my anatomy classes, though I did not want to admit what I was seeing. Human bones. Virgil held up his hand, signaling us to stop. His face had gone pale beneath his beard. He pointed to the ground near the entrance, where the soft earth showed clear prints. The prints were wrong. They looked almost like dog prints, but the toes were too long, too flexible, and there was something else. faint impressions beside the paw prints that looked almost like fingers. I felt a cold dread settling into my chest. I did not know what could make prints like that. I did not want to know. Then we heard the growling. At first, I thought they were dogs. Large dogs, maybe Great Dane size with patchy fur and lean, muscular bodies. There were 5 of them, spreading out in a semicircle around the entrance to the den, blocking any approach. But as my eyes adjusted to the shadows, I realized these were not dogs. Not anymore. Their bodies were wrong. The proportions were off, like a dog that had been stretched and twisted. Their backs were too long, their limbs jointed in ways that seemed almost human. Their faces were elongated into muzzles, but the structure beneath was different, more like a human skull that had been deformed than a true canine snout. And their eyes. The hiker had been right about the eyes. They were not dog eyes. They were human eyes, set too far apart, staring out from those twisted faces with an intelligence that dogs should not possess. One of them, the largest, moved forward. Its mouth opened, revealing teeth that were somewhere between human and canine, and it made a sound. Not a growl exactly, more like a voice trying to growl. A human voice that had forgotten how to make words. Virgil raised his rifle and fired. The shot caught the lead creature in the shoulder. It yelped, a sound that was horribly close to a human scream, and the pack scattered. They moved with terrifying speed, disappearing into the undergrowth in seconds, their bodies twisting and flowing in ways that no normal animal could match. I stood frozen, my heart pounding, trying to process what I had just seen. Sheriff Hendricks was shouting into his radio, calling for backup. Virgil was reloading his rifle with shaking hands. As we retreated toward town, I noticed something on the ground. Blood from Virgil's shot, a trail of dark droplets leading off into the brush. But there was something else in the blood, something small and pale. I knelt down and picked it up before the others could see. It was a tooth, a human tooth, a molar with a silver filling, the kind a dentist would put in. I pocketed the tooth without saying anything. I did not know what to do with this information. I did not know what it meant, but I was starting to suspect something terrible. 2 nights later, the pack came into town. I was at my clinic, checking on some animals that were boarding overnight, when I heard the screaming. It came from down the street, from the direction of the hardware store. I ran to the window and saw chaos. People running, shouting, the streetlights illuminating shapes that moved too fast to track clearly. I grabbed the shotgun I kept in my office for emergencies and ran outside. The scene was worse than I could have imagined. The creatures were everywhere, moving through the streets with terrifying coordination, cutting off escape routes, herding people into corners. I saw Old Man Willard from the gas station go down, dragged to the ground by 2 of the creatures while he screamed for help. I saw a young mother running with her children, pursued by a creature that loped after them on all 4s, gaining ground with every stride. I fired at the creature chasing the family. My shot went wide, but the noise was enough to make it veer off, disappearing between 2 buildings. The mother and children made it inside the grocery store, slamming the door behind them. The attack lasted maybe 10 minutes. It felt like hours. When it was over, 4 people were dead, and 6 more were injured. The creatures had retreated as quickly as they had appeared, vanishing back into the darkness of the surrounding forest. I helped treat the wounded while we waited for ambulances from the county hospital. One of the injured was a teenage boy named Cody, who had been bitten on the arm. The wound was deep, the flesh torn, but not life-threatening. As I cleaned and bandaged the wound, I noticed something. The edges of the bite were not quite right. The teeth marks did not match any animal pattern I knew, but they did match something I had been trying not to think about since I found that tooth in the woods. The bite marks matched human teeth that had been sharpened into points. The morning after the attack, I went looking for answers. Opal Garner was the oldest resident of Cutter's Hollow. 94 years old, had lived in the area her entire life. She was known for remembering things that everyone else had forgotten. I found her on her porch, rocking slowly in her chair, watching the woods with eyes that had seen nearly a century of life in these hills. I asked her about the creatures, about the old stories the older residents had mentioned at the town meeting, about anything that might explain what was happening. Opal was quiet for a long time. Then she started talking. She said her grandmother had told her stories when she was a little girl. Stories about people who had lived in these hollows a long time ago, before the town was founded. People who had done something wrong, broken some rule, angered something they should not have angered. The stories said these people had been cursed, changed, turned into something that was neither human nor animal, but something in between. They lived in the deep woods, far from human settlements, hunting and surviving like animals. But they were not animals. They remembered being human. They remembered what they had lost. And sometimes, when they were hungry enough or angry enough, they came out of the woods to take what they wanted. Opal said the stories called them the Hollow Ones because they were hollow inside, hollow where their humanity used to be. I asked if the stories said how to stop them, how to kill them, how to end the curse. Opal shook her head. The stories never said how the curse started or how it could be ended. They just said to stay out of the deep woods, to respect the old boundaries, to never go where you were not supposed to go. I asked what that meant. What old boundaries? What places? Opal pointed toward the forest, toward a ridge in the distance that was barely visible through the trees. She said there was a place up there, a hollow that did not appear on any map. Her grandmother had told her to never go there, had made her promise. Opal had kept that promise her entire life. I had a feeling I was about to break it. Virgil Cross was the only person in town who might know where the unmarked hollow was. He had spent his life exploring these forests. If anyone knew the secret places, it was him. At first, Virgil refused. He said he had seen enough. He said whatever was out there could stay out there as far as he was concerned. But when I told him about Opal's stories, about the hollow that did not appear on any map, something changed in his face. He said he knew the place. He had stumbled on it once, decades ago, when he was a young man. He had felt wrong the moment he entered, like the air itself was heavier there. He had turned around and left without exploring further. He had never gone back. We set out the next morning, just the two of us. We told the sheriff we were doing reconnaissance, looking for den sites. We did not mention where we were really going. The hike took most of the day. The terrain grew rougher as we climbed, the trees older and more gnarled, the undergrowth thicker. There were no trails here, no signs that humans had passed through in years. Late in the afternoon, we found the hollow. It was exactly as Virgil had described, a depression in the hillside, surrounded by ancient oaks, the air thick and still. No birds sang, no insects buzzed. The forest was completely silent. In the center of the hollow was the remains of a settlement, old cabins collapsed into piles of rotted wood, a stone foundation that might have been a church or a meeting hall, and in the middle of it all, a well. I approached the well cautiously. It was made of the same stone as the foundation, clearly old, clearly handmade. The opening was dark, impossibly dark, as if no light could penetrate it. There was something written on the stone rim, words carved into the rock, worn by time but still legible. But they were not words. They were names, dozens of names, carved in a spiral pattern around the rim of the well, and next to each name, a date. Dates going back over 200 years. The most recent date was only 3 years ago. As we stood by the well, Virgil started acting strangely. He was sweating, trembling, scratching at his arms like something was crawling under his skin. I asked if he was okay. Virgil did not answer. He just stared at the well with wide, terrified eyes. Then Virgil started talking. His voice was strange, distant, like he was remembering something he had tried very hard to forget. He said he had lied. He had not just found this place and left. He had stayed. He had explored, and he had found something in the well. Something that had spoken to him. Something that had offered him a deal. Virgil said he had been sick back then, dying of something the doctors could not fix. He had come to the woods to make peace with his death, and instead, he had found the well. The thing in the well had promised to save him, to make him strong, to let him live. All he had to do was give it something in return. I asked what he had given. Virgil did not answer. He just started to change. It happened slowly at first. His spine curving, his limbs elongating, his face stretching into something that was no longer human. He fell to all fours, his body twisting and reshaping, his screams becoming growls, becoming howls, becoming something that had no name. I ran. I ran through the forest, branches tearing at my clothes, roots catching at my feet. I could hear Virgil behind me, or what had been Virgil, crashing through the undergrowth, gaining ground. I do not know how I made it back to town. I do not remember most of the run. I just remember the terror, the sound of something that used to be my friend chasing me through the darkness. I made it to my clinic just as the sun was setting. I locked the door, barricaded it with everything I could find, and collapsed against the wall, gasping for breath. That night, the pack came back. I watched from the window as they emerged from the tree line. A dozen shapes, maybe more, their eyes reflecting the streetlights. And among them, I recognized one. The one that had been Virgil, still wearing scraps of the clothes he had been wearing that morning. Still looking at me with eyes that held a terrible recognition. They did not attack that night. They just sat at the edge of the woods, watching the town, waiting. I understood then. The pack was not hunting randomly. The pack was growing. State authorities finally arrived 2 days later, armed to the teeth, ready to deal with what they assumed was a pack of dangerous feral dogs. I tried to warn them about what they were really facing, but no one believed me. The first team that went into the woods did not come back. After that, the authorities changed their approach. They declared the area a biohazard zone, some cover story about a disease affecting the local wildlife. The town was evacuated. Residents were relocated to temporary housing in the nearest city. The forest was sealed off. I was one of the last to leave. I stood at the edge of town, looking back at the woods I had known my whole life, and I saw them watching from the tree line. A dozen shapes, maybe more, their eyes reflecting the lights of the evacuation vehicles. One of them stepped forward slightly. It was Virgil, or what had been Virgil. It raised its head and made a sound, not a howl, something else, something that almost sounded like words. Then they retreated into the forest and were gone. I left with the other evacuees. I relocated to a city 3 states away. I started a new practice, a new life. I tried to forget what I had seen, what I had learned, what had happened to my friend. But I cannot forget. The truth follows me everywhere. It has been 2 years since the evacuation. Cutter's Hollow is still officially a biohazard zone. The forest is still sealed off. No one is allowed in. But I have heard things, rumors, stories from hunters who have ventured too close to the boundary, stories about howling in the night, stories about shapes moving through the trees, stories about people who go into those woods and never come out. I have also done research, looked into the history of the area, the names carved around that well. Most of the names belong to people who had disappeared from the region over the past 2 centuries. Settlers, pioneers, wanderers, people who had gone into the woods and never returned. The dates next to their names, I believe, were the dates of their transformation. The dates they stopped being human and became something else. And the most recent name, the one dated just 3 years ago, belonged to a hiker who had gone missing in the national forest. A hiker who was never found. I wonder how many of them there are now. How large the pack has grown in the 2 years since the evacuation. How far they have spread through the sealed-off forest. I wonder what will happen when the biohazard zone is eventually opened again, when people return to those woods, not knowing what is waiting for them. I wonder if the pack is still growing, still hunting, still adding names to the rim of that ancient well. I am telling you this as a warning. There are places in this country that are not safe. Places where the boundaries between human and animal have become blurred. Places where ancient things wait, hungry and patient, for anyone foolish enough to wander too close. If you ever find yourself in the Ozark Mountains, stay on the marked trails. Do not venture into the deep woods. Do not look for places that do not appear on maps. And if you hear howling at night, howling that does not quite sound like wolves or coyotes, do not investigate, because the creatures that make that sound were human ones. They had names and families and lives, and now they are something else, something that remembers what it lost, something that wants to share its curse with as many people as possible. I do not know if there is a way to stop them. I do not know if there is a way to reverse the transformation. I do not know if the thing in the well can be destroyed or appeased or even understood. All I know is that my friend Virgil is still out there somewhere, running with the pack, hunting through the night. And sometimes, in my dreams, I see his eyes looking at me from the darkness. They still look human. That is the worst part. They still look human. And I wonder, in my darkest moments, if he remembers me. If somewhere inside that twisted body, some part of Virgil Cross is still aware, still suffering, still begging for someone to end it. I hope not. I hope the transformation is complete. I hope there is nothing left of the man I knew. Because if there is, if he is still in there, trapped in that body, running with the pack, hunting and killing and spreading the curse to others, then there is no horror I can imagine that compares to what he is experiencing. And I wonder how long it will be before the sealed-off forest is not enough to contain them. How long before the pack grows large enough to push past the boundaries? How long before the howling starts in other towns, other forests, other places that thought they were safe? The thing in the well has been there for over 200 years. It has been patient. It has been waiting. I do not think it is done waiting yet.